Yeah, I joined the Navy and went to the Naval School of Music. I was a drummer at first. Well, I passed audition on drums first, but I wanted to play the bass. So I told him I wanted to play the bass. I said I could play the bass if I played the tuba. So I said, okay, give me an audition on tuba. I took the audition on tuba and I went in there as a tuba player. And while I was there, a friend of mine from Cass, who was the bass player at Cass, Bob Friday, he had joined the Navy and I didn't know it. And I looked up one day and there he was. So I had the Navy teacher who was teaching me classically, you know, with the bows and stuff like that. And then Friday came in there and taught me the roots of bebop, jazz, blues, rhythm changes, the tunes that were the basis for the tunes that a lot of bebop tunes were written off of. You know, and tunes that, you know, if you were considered yourself a jazz musician, you had to know. You know, it was a certain amount of tunes that, because they were the base for that music. And the musicians, the reason that music is so important is because you had virtuoso musicians. It wasn't just somebody say, I want to play this, I want to play that. It was cats that could do it. And that elevated the music. Then later on there have been attempts by other people to lessen the import of this music. But the music speaks for itself. And the level of proficiency that was exhibited by people like Bird and John Coltrane and Max Roach and Art Blakey and the whole, you know, those were virtuosos. And they established that as their standard. And a lot of people didn't want to reach that standard or even attempt to, so they just went off and did other things and said, well, it's the same thing, but it ain't the same thing. And it's a cultural insult to not only us as musicians, but black people. This is something we brought over when they brought us as slaves. We brought our culture, but they have, in this country, and even you know, in different places, have tried to kill our culture. They don't want us to exhibit what we can do. So I had, as a musician, have striven to elevate myself, my music, and the music of those around me to what it is supposed to be. You know, there was a time when in Africa, they had instruments that they used to communicate talk, words, ideas, talking drums, mbiras, rebab. You know, these instruments weren't just for dancing. They were actually instruments to communicate with each other. And they wanted to talk. They talked with music. And this is the highest form of music I have heard. There used to be a record company called, I can't remember, But anyhow, they used to go to Africa and record the tribes, and they would record the music as the men or the musicians come back from hunts or different things that they were doing. And they communicated what happened on the hunt through the instruments, through music. So I don't think there is any music that has got anywhere close to that, because the rest of the music don't communicate that strong a message to the listener, nor do the listeners have themselves so attuned to the music that they understand what is saying. And this is what we now, as we search for ways to better communicate, this is one that we should explore as a society. And our educators, black educators, need to put a lot of energy and effort into making sure that our culture has exposure. Not overexposure, but exposure. So that people are exposed, so our children are exposed, so these schools are exposed. It's important because this is what we're trying to do now. Have our culture recognized so that we don't have the type of mentality that we have going in the world that we live now, where our people are portrayed as something less than they are. And it's done culturally. If they can deny our culture, they can deny us and our contributions to man, to civilization. And that's what they be trying to do. That's why, to me, it's very important. The music is very important. The things that come out of our heads, the way we live, the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we dance. All these things are important as far as we got children that want to know, well, what did you do, Daddy? What you do, Mama? And what do we say? I work at the factory. Oh, yeah? So then they go out and do the dumb shit, because what are we showing them? You know, you talk to our educators. How many of them have stood up and said, our culture is the dominant culture of man? They don't say it. They go to college, they come out with the alphabet behind their name, but tell the truth. You know, I mean, just because, you know, if you're going to go there and get your education and then come out and want to run around the street like, I know this, or I'm this, and then somebody say, well, what about your culture? Oh, we don't have there's no culture. It's a downer, it's an insult to us to have music that come from us, and you look today and you say, well, who's who? And somebody's reporting to somebody that comes from another planet damn near. And they have no spiritual connection to the music. No spiritual connection to so many things that are important as far as, anyhow, let me get back to my point. Okay, so I went in the Navy. And I started playing the bass in the Navy. In Navy bands aboard ships and all like that. I ended up in Boston. And when I was in Boston, I ran into some cats to work a gig. I got in the car and they started telling me their names. And they, you know, Ali and Wajid. I said, what y'all? They said, we Muslims. I said, oh yeah? What's that? So they explained to me about one God and the religion, and I couldn't find nothing wrong with it. So I took my Shahada, within a month or so, and I became Muslim. This was in 1961 in Boston. So then we started working in Boston. Well, I had a gig when I got in the Navy in that band I used. I used on piano, Wajid was on trumpet, Sam Rivers was on tenor sax, Bobby Ward was on drums, and man, we was hitting it. So then, after that, Bobby and I used to hang out a lot. And Tony Williams and a lot of drummers. They was all drummers. I was only bass player, but I feel like I'm a drummer too. Anyhow, we went in this club one night and sat in, and when we came off the stand, the two cats who had the gig, who was Jimmy Wood, the bass player, and Sam Woodyard, the drummer, came up and said, hey y'all, they were working with Duke Ellington's band at the time. So they said, well look, y'all want the gig? We said, yeah. And man, we ended up working in there a whole year, 6 nights a week. And that's how I got my chops together. And plus all the cats that used to come through Boston, that's where they come, because it was after hours joint. And I was able to meet a lot of musicians, and they were in New York, you know, they come up to Boston. So then, fast forward, I worked around Boston for years, and then I came back to Detroit for a while, back to Boston for a while, got in some trouble, come back to Detroit. But this time I ended up incarcerated, so while I was there, I practiced. I had an instrument in my hand for like 12 hours a day. So then I practiced. I played, I learned my scales, I learned my chords, I learned things that I wouldn't take the time to do in the street, so I had to be locked up to do it. Anyhow, when I got out, I had to do some paper here. And after a while, I get a call from Boston to come up there because Bill Russell had bought this club and he wanted a jazz group in there. So I went up there to Slade's, and I worked at Slade's. And meanwhile, I had started taking business courses while I was in the joint, because I tried to get my high school diploma, but the Board of Education of Detroit wouldn't send my record so I could finish school. So I took courses in business, bookkeeping, and accounting, and when I got out, I hired me a PhD professor of economics to tutor me in economics. And this was very beneficial because I hadn't approached a career like this, knowing where the money's come and stuff, and so I had a lot of teachers, officers of what's that company that made the cameras, you take and get an instant camera at the time. Anyhow, I can't think of the name. Polaroid. Yeah, well those were my teachers. They used to come to my business meetings and give me guidance and taught me about taxation. And so I learned. Then I started a club. After a while, I had a club up in Boston, after I was joint, called Common Ground, which was about 2 blocks from police headquarters, downtown Detroit. Boston. So we hung out there for a while, and I started, I had an import-export company from Africa and importing, leopard skins and all that stuff that's now forbidden, anyhow, well, I stayed there and had concerts at the club and stuff. And, you know, I finally said, I'm leaving. I'm going to New York. So I jumped up. I had gotten married and had a couple of kids. So me and my wife and my son moved to New York in 1961, 59, 61, and moved down on the Lower East Side, which was cold, you know, because that's where all the musicians were. You know, like, well, the first day I was in New York, I met Wilbur Ware, one of my favorite bass players. And we hit it off. Later on down the line, I was playing in a club and Charlie Mingus was playing with his group opposite us. I was scared to death because Mingus has been known to jump on cats if he didn't like the way you played. He'd take the bass and cut you out and wouldn't let you play. I mean, he had a rep. So we played first. I played with Sonny Fortune. When I came out, I was out in the club in the bottom line around the village. And I was sitting there with my wife and my mother-in-law, you know. My mother-in-law was a jazz fan, which made our life much more pleasant. Her brother played vibes, played with Cecil Taylor. Griffin was his last name, I don't remember. So anyhow, I was sitting at the table with her and my wife, and this guy hollered a cup way across the club, "Hey, bass player!" I said, "Oh no."